One Bay Area, the region coming together to develop sustainable communities.
One Bay Area, that's a catchphrase to try and describe the fact that what we do in one community affects all of us and that we all have a stake in the region's well-being over time.
All 9 counties which border the Bay have an opportunity to make the livability of the whole Bay Area far better than it is today.
There are trends that are currently going on in our Bay Area region that need to be addressed, and they can only be addressed if we all work together on them.
Making individual decisions by jurisdiction, whether it be cities, counties, transit agencies, and the like, better knowing how those decisions affect the larger set of objectives for the region.
Things that relate to air quality, things that relate to greenhouse gas emissions, things that relate to the housing for all of our people, not just those at the highest levels of income. These are things that we can't solve community by community. We have to solve them as a whole.
One Bay Area, in many ways, builds upon what the San Francisco Bay Area has been doing for some time in a more interconnected way. It takes a couple of arguably arcane planning mechanisms, one being the Regional Transportation Plan, and another being sort of the housing planning for the region, and brings them together. And it brings them together in a way that is geared to be more sustainable, to reduce the amount of driving people do in their day-to-day lives, and to help the region grow in a way that retains a lot of its really good features and good character, the things that people value about the Bay Area, but also provides housing opportunities for a range of populations and makes our transportation network more efficient and effective.
How people live here, I think, is something that we have to reflect on more and more as we make government decisions and offer elected officials a little bit different way to carry forward their objectives from a local perspective and marry them up with larger regional objectives.
The linchpin of this under Senate Bill 375 that was signed into law by former Governor Schwarzenegger brings together these different pieces into something called a sustainable community strategy.
And that is both embedded in the legislation that was passed in 2008, but it's most importantly embedded in the vision of what we're trying to achieve. A sustainable means for future generations as well as today. A community is what we all really consider to be the highest value and the highest quality of life, as if we live in a community we can relate to. And a strategy is what it's going to take. It's not a rigid edict, it's an approach, it's a way of approaching challenges.
The sustainable community strategy requires every region in California, including the San Francisco Bay Area, to identify places to accommodate its future growth.
Sustainable community would be one where we're able to meet environmental objectives, do so in a very real-world economy. We don't do it at the disadvantage of business, jobs, affordability.
Essentially, the sustainable community strategy requires that we not continue some of the development pattern that we had, say, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, which was largely greenfield development, where people had to drive great distances, and we ate up a lot of our really precious green belt, but that we build upon more of the work of recent years of accommodating more of the development in transit-served infill areas, so that people are driving less, so that we're revitalizing our cities and our suburban centers and our town centers, and doing so in a way that makes it possible for people from a variety of income groups to find a home in the future.
And projecting that future is based in part on RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. It's a decades-old state law that forecasts growth and asks local governments to help share in accommodating the region's future housing needs.
One of the mandates, the chief among them, is the requirement that the San Francisco Bay region and the local communities that make up the San Francisco Bay region plan for housing that is sufficient to meet the total new demand and across all income levels, and not to rely upon housing that's provided by outlying counties in what's referred to as the spillover effect.
The calculations are based on how many jobs we're creating, as well as the kind of jobs we're creating, and what types of housing do we need to have in place to accommodate the full range of jobs. So if you're creating lower waged, big box retail types of jobs, you need a little bit more of the affordable housing for the lower income people that are working in those jobs. If you're creating higher end jobs, then you're looking at how do you have enough market rate houses for the people in those job classifications.
The bottom line is that that part of the legislation is going to mean that the Bay Area and many, if not all, local jurisdictions are going to have to plan for more housing than we have traditionally planned for.
Unfortunately, the state has a one-size-fits-all approach to this. They come up with the numbers, they divide the numbers, and then we're supposed to try to figure this out. What the Sustainable Community Strategy does is say, where are our important resources in the region? We have ports. Should we be allocating housing numbers to areas that we should be preserving for international port commerce? We also have agricultural lands. Our Marin organic farm programs are an example of that. Sonoma County, Napa County, all of those areas that are growing food for the area, for the region. Are those areas important, and should we not be plowing over those areas as well? We also have national parks, state parks, county parks and protected lands, city parks. And the parks and recreation aspect is an important aspect for community life. And then you superimpose that, the expectation that sea level is going to be rising, and should development be going at places that's going to be inundated with water, where you would need very expensive infrastructure to protect the housing or jobs that are created there.
The Sustainable Community Strategy is very likely to concentrate future growth around employment and transit centers.
Now, how do you manage the traffic for all of these people if you don't have good transportation services? And that's why in the Sustainable Community Strategy, they're looking at transit corridors and, the rail system or the 101 bus system or the Sir Francis Drake corridor as areas that make it more amenable for people to not have to get in their cars or have a car to get where they need to go.
I expect that the end result of the RENA process is going to look somewhat like what ABAG's been doing in this area for the last several years, which is to cut a deal among local agencies to focus and concentrate much of the future growth in transit-rich areas.
San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, parts of the East Bay and the peninsula and so forth, which will really be taking on a lot of this growth. And I think for residents of Marin and elsewhere to think about what will it take for those communities to be able to do so. If they're willing to take on the growth that takes pressure off our green belt, that takes pressure off small communities that don't have a lot of capacity to grow, or in some cases desire, what are the trade-offs? What really needs to happen to make that growth happen in the places that are more sustainable and that are more open to that growth, given their transit, given their proximity to jobs and so forth.
How MTC is involved is looking at the transportation piece. People may live a little away from their jobs, but if they're close to a public transportation that allows them to not have to get in their car to get to their jobs, that's part of the factor.
What's been very important is that we find a way to marry up the planning for the transportation network that is complemented by land use decisions.
So that's going to be part of the tension in this SB 375 process, is how do we use density as a positive force for our future community. And by that I mean, if we want to have, as I said, a transit system that works, we've got to have it where people can walk to it, not have to drive or take a bus, because they just simply won't use it if that's what has to happen. If we want to have housing affordable to a broad range of economic income levels, we've got to make it more affordable, and density is one of the most effective ways of making it affordable, because you can spread the costs for the infrastructure and the land across more units.
To have a transportation network that has blinders on is designed in a manner that is not reflecting where we want to be for land use purposes, it would be a huge waste of time, effort, resources. The Commission has taken that very much to heart over at least the last decade. recognizing that where we make major investments in transit, whether it be a BART extension, the SMART system, light rail programs throughout the region, where there is a regional contribution of funding to be made, the Commission says, look, we need to make sure that local jurisdictions are partners as well in designing around each station to take full advantage of what that new rail system or bus system in some cases could actually be providing us. That to me is really what the promise of SB 375 is that it's kicking it up another notch in terms of our evolution of this thinking and saying when we look seriously about where we're going to be growing as a region, how large we will be growing, where we can locate effectively folks so that we are cost effectively and efficiently for the residents using our transportation network, that takes joint planning. And that's what SB 375 is really about.
What I want people to understand is that this process that we're going through, this planning, involves the issues that affect our lives, our children's lives, and their children's lives. And so we need to find a place and a way to engage people, to allow them to come into the conversation, share what they have to say, and then leave the conversation with the remainder of us in the room still understanding and having listened closely to what they're saying. So I think our job is really to create forums or settings in which people who aren't ready to make it their career or make it their season can come in, have a point of view, be respected while they're sharing those thoughts, and then be considered even after they've left the room by those of us who are put in place to resolve these challenges.
There's going to be a lot of opportunity for public input. We're also asking local jurisdictions, all of the communities in the region, to have presentations with their city council and so forth about what this is so that everybody has an opportunity to weigh in.
I really want to make sure that, that the concerns about, well, what does one Bay Area mean? Are we really moving towards just one regional plan that will dictate what will happen at the local level? I really see it as almost the opposite. It's kind of the next manifestation of all the local jurisdictions, all the residents of the Bay Area getting behind what needs to be done on a regional basis. And I think we're going to accomplish a lot.
To learn more about One Bay Area, Senate Bill 375, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, here are a few resources for you.